So let's first talk about the power of plant strategies and why we want to think about the strategies that plants use to grow and thrive and survive in certain areas. So this model is really great because what it allows us to do is it allows us to compare site with plants and management techniques that we can use for growing these plants. Really, when we're looking at horticulture, this is one of the few, if only, models where we try to bring all three of these aspects together. We are trying to think about the site that you're going to be putting the plants into, along with the genetics and the growth strategies that these plants use. And then also, how are you going to be managing it? Whether you're going to be going in there frequently, infrequently, whether you're mowing, burning, what strategies are you going to be using to maintain that? The beautiful thing about this plant strategy approach is that, again, it brings and marries all three of these together as you're considering species to use in a design. There are other benefits as well too. Beth Chatto, of course, made famous the statement right plant, right place. And if you go visit, of course, her garden and nursery in England, you'll see this. You'll see that again, where what they have done is they have strategically placed plants that have certain plant strategies and growth strategies into certain environments. The more drought tolerant, stress tolerators are growing in the gravel garden. The more competitive species are going down near the pond. Again, they're trying to fit the right plant into the right place. And we're just continuing along with that theme that she taught us about. The other thing too is that if we're considering plant strategies and the way they grow, we're saving time, we're saving resources, and we're saving money, which are three things that as we go into world horticulture are something we want to save. I'm sure at some point in time you've seen failed projects like this, where again, a plant was planted in and it wasn't a perfect mixture of the site and it wasn't perfectly managed. What ends up happening is that it fails. And there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from these. But of course, one of the goals of thinking about the plant strategies is that we're trying to save the limited time, resources, and money that we have. We can also look at filling gaps and niches that occur in our plantings and plant communities. For example, this is just a snapshot from my home garden in the spring. You can see that this little bluebonnet here has woven itself through the planting. Again, sowing seeds where there's open gaps in there, acting as a rooterel, pioneer species that's going in, filling in those gaps, while other things like the phloxes and milkweeds and penstemon are just getting up and getting growing for the spring. And then, of course, what will happen? The bluebonnets will set seed and then they'll die out so that other plants will be able to rise and shine. And then their seed will continue to last in that soil and return another year. Another way that we can think about filling gaps and niches is, of course, with bulbs. That a lot of times bulbs are able to rise up at certain times of the year where maybe we have holes in the landscape, holes in the phenological calendar where we need bloom time as well too. And so things like Lycoris radiata is a great one for us to use in the southeast. Durable, tough, reliable stress tolerator that's able to take our heat and humidity. And then the other thing too to think about is that with considering plant strategies, we now have predictive power that we can now look at a plant, consider specifically the characteristics we see at it, like what strategies it's using to grow and survive, and we can anticipate what it's going to do. So if you have bulbs, whether they're narcissus or iphion or tulips, when we plant those in the ground, we can anticipate that at some point in time they're going to be up above the ground and at other points of the time, they're going to be below the ground. Why? Because they have a storage organ and they go dormant. But stress tolerators, that tends to be the way they behave and act. The other thing too is that as we're considering the power of plant strategies is that we can increase our planting diversity. That if we know that we have certain species that are going to be very competitive and try to take over things, we can try to limit those to make sure that they're having a much more limited impact. Or we can do things like stress the site, disturb the site to help to introduce more species into that arena. And then, of course, the other thing too that we can do is we can plan for change. That as we're going forward, we can make sure that we're planning for the change that is inevitable in our landscapes. For example, at our house around the structure, we did not have a lot of trees. And one of the things that I said about doing early on is planting native flowering trees like Hillsia, the silver bell, that of course could start to cast some shade. And once we started to build up some shade, then I was able to come in there and start putting some shade tolerant, stress tolerant plants, like, for example, our native Trillium gracile and other caryxes, other things like bloodroot, sanguinaria. And horticulture and design, that's one of the things that we anticipate is that change is going to come in a landscape. Yes, we can prevent that, but we can also ride that wave of successional change and make planting decisions. If we're aware of the strategies that plants are using to survive, we can, of course, take advantage of those and consider those. So, just like me citing these trillium, where I know these trees are going to continue to mature and their canopy expand on out, I can anticipate that change is going to come as we go forward into the future.